what I'm going to talk about today is a very trendy topic, maybe a slightly overhyped topic. And my role, certainly in BT Global Services Innovation Team, is to try and cut through the hype, do the research, and try and figure out where the technology is. I am, of course, talking about artificial intelligence. Is it going to kill all of our jobs? Is it going to wipe out the contact center? Hence, since I love Marvel movies, I've entitled the very short talk I'm going to talk to you about today, Botman versus Super Agent. Who will win in this conflict? So hardly a day goes past, frankly, that the press does not have a story about AI and robotics taking our jobs. What are we going to do in a jobless future? Well, oddly enough, none of this is new. In fact, all of the headlines here, I think the earliest one is 1928. So ever since we invented machines, we have become paranoid that they're going to wipe us out. And we're going through another wave of that at the moment. And largely, I always find this topic particularly reminiscent, really, because I joined BT 26 years ago. Obviously, I was only 6 at the time. And my first ever project in BT was building a neural network to support contact center agents. Well, what goes around comes around. We forgot about AI for a very long time, and now we've remembered. And actually, we figured that actually it could be very useful to try and really combat some of the trends that Ken was talking about, the fact that our customers are moving very, very fast. How on earth do we move as fast as our consumers? And actually, we probably do need some technology to help us. So in terms of the paranoia, how many jobs are going to get wiped out by AI and robotics? Now, I'm a researcher. My instinct entirely is to say, well, what's the research telling us about this particular trend? How many jobs are going to be wiped out? Well, let's look at what the research tells us. And by God, there's a lot of research out there. And yes, there is no conclusion as to definitively how many jobs we're going to see being wiped out by new technologies. And again, you know, this is not a new trend. Now, the oft-quoted piece of research is actually the one done, a very good piece of research by the Oxford Institute. That one reckons that around about nearly 50% of jobs will be wiped out completely in the next 10 years. It was based on US markets, so maybe the US is slightly more at risk than other markets, but I actually think that piece of research is a little bit problematic because it's looking at jobs. And I am fairly convinced that no jobs, well, very few jobs, are going to be wiped out entirely. We've seen autonomous vehicles. I think actually in transportation, maybe in retail, there are jobs that are certainly at risk of being wiped out. This has happened before, of course, because remember the typing pool? So we can see job categories getting wiped out. I think the more persuasive research is looking more at task. And the reason is that robots and AI are good at certain things, and we are good at certain things. So in actual fact, when we look at the task-based research out there, we get a slightly different picture. So certainly some of the stuff that's been done by McKinsey, for example, is saying that around about 60% of jobs can have about a third of their activities automated within the next 10 years. And then there's also a piece by the OECD, reckons around 9% of jobs will be fully automated. So we're kind of anywhere between 47% and 5% of jobs may well be automated out in the next 10 years. That's not giving me a huge amount of clue as to what exactly is going on and whether we as contact center professionals need to really worry about our future. So let's delve a little bit more into the science, shall we? Now, I would propose to you that there are certain jobs that are more likely to be automated than others. So certainly if we maybe look at doctors versus nurses, which is the most likely one to be wiped out? Okay, think about it. Hairdressers versus cashiers. I think we all know the answer to that one, mainly because I've done some not definitive research with audiences, certainly asking, would you allow a robot to cut your hair? I have to say, usually at this point, most of the women, including myself, I have to say, start to go, no, no. Some of the men are much more comfortable about this. So I think maybe men's hairdressers might get wiped out. I suspect women's hairdressers won't. And then we've got pilots versus customer service assistants, what are they called? Flight attendants. I don't know what they like being called these days. The guys that help us in the cabin. Who's most likely to get automated? Well, let's take a look at some more science behind this. A guy called Moravec, Hans Moravec, basically worked out actually it's the late 80s, that some things that we do very, very naturally, machines really struggle with. So even things like walking. Ask a Dalek how difficult walking is, and particularly stairs. I noticed in Doctor Who they had to reinvent the Daleks, because although Daleks are really scary robots, as soon as you put a staircase in front of them, they'd fail dismally. Now, of course, they have fitted Daleks with flotation devices. They can go upstairs. They are terrifying. But actually, walking is a very difficult task for any AI or robotic device to take on. Manual dexterity, that's also quite difficult. But other things that we're very good at doing that are more relevant in the customer service space, maybe we need to look at. One of the things that we really do underestimate is conversation. Conversation's a really interesting one, because conversation was inherently developed to develop relationships between human beings. It's not actually very good in terms of conveying precise instructions for machines to follow. So actually, the art of conversation may be a very interesting one to pick up as we go along, because conversation is very difficult for machines to perfect. All of these things are actually some of the things that we might think are very difficult. The stock market, writing articles, operating machines. Machines can do themselves. So we start to see this split between man and machine, which gives us some clues as to what tasks may well be automated in the future. So let's go back to what's the most likely job to be automated. Actually, if we look at the pilot versus the aircrew, the answer is the pilot is the most likely job to be automated. And actually, there's a lovely theory that's going around that's called variance in value and proficiency roles versus pivotal roles. So actually, a pilot, you want your pilot to be able to fly a plane. They get to a level of proficiency that hopefully qualifies them to fly the plane. But if that pilot could then do loop-the-loops, actually that's irrelevant for their job, I hope, anyway. So once you've achieved proficiency as a pilot, you can't really enhance yourself any further. And actually, of course, we do know that pilots rarely fly planes these days. It's often the plane that flies itself. It's only in an emergency that the pilot really has to step in. So that's the role that's most likely to be automated because it is a proficiency role. See also doctor. However, aircrew and customer service people and nurses actually perform a pivotal role. In other words, you can achieve proficiency and you get some value out of that role, but getting better and better at that role actually adds more and more value to the organisation. And certainly if you're delivering customer service, having someone who is phenomenally good over years and years of experience actually does add genuine value to the interaction. And they are the roles that are least likely to get automated. So that's some good news for us in the contact center industry. Oddly enough, if we look at job types within contact centers, it's said that the original Oxford Institute research estimated that it was a 99% likelihood that telemarketing jobs were going to get wiped out because largely they're proficiency jobs. Actually, when you look at customer service jobs within contact centers, probably only about 55% because they're pivotal jobs. So again, quite good news. So we actually asked you guys a couple of years ago around what you thought the contact center of 2020 was going to do. And this was prior to the big hype about AI. In fact, what we are seeing is digital self-service is driving profound change into the contact center industry simply because customers are doing an awful lot more themselves. We're pushing the intelligence to the customer. So inevitably, the backlash into the contact center is we get all the meaty, complex, emotive stuff. And by the way, that's good because as we've just seen, that's the kind of stuff that's very, very difficult to automate. But it is challenging work. So how do we use technology like AI, like robotics, to actually start to help people, free people up to do the things that they can do in terms of complex problem solving? So what we're starting to see, and this is brand new research, we haven't even published this. In fact, I haven't even written this research up yet. So you're getting an exclusive preview today of something we're hoping to publish in March around the future roles and skill sets that we're probably going to need in the contact center. And yes, AI will probably be one of those skill sets, mostly in the form of the chatbot again. Bots are the new apps, I am told. Chatbots are brilliant, but they are dumb. Frankly, I have yet to have a particularly profound conversation with Siri, Cortana, or any chatbots because they are first-generation AI. They only know what you tell them. It's garbage in, garbage out. They can't invent stuff. They are only as good as the data you put in the back end. So that's the first thing. The second thing is they are very difficult. It's very difficult to apply a bot to something like a complaint. I'm sure all of you get complaints occasionally. Some of them are 30 pages long. In terms of actually trying to process that into machine-readable formats, where do you start with a 30-page complaint? It's almost impossible to pass that into machine-readable format. So an AI, a chatbot, is going to find that incredibly difficult to respond to. And then we have sarcasm. I know it's the lowest form of wit, but certainly in both the UK and Ireland, we use it as consumers. And of course, machines really don't understand sarcasm. So one of my personal favorite treats, thank you to a particular train company for my free sauna this morning. If we pass that in machine language, it's going to come out as a positive comment. But do train companies actually offer saunas? Probably not. And it was so good to see that your maintenance department hadn't spoilt things by making unnecessary repairs. Again, that's probably going to be neutral to positive if we actually break that down as a past statement. So again, how do we understand things like sarcasm? Machines will find that very difficult. And also, it's very, very difficult to process context, and in particular, emotional context in a lot of these bots. Now, there are some bots out there that I think are showing promise. They are the second generation ones, in particular one called Digital Genius that we have in our showcase at Adastral Park, which is our main R&D centre. It's actually a spin-off from Massachusetts Institute of Technology. If you've got agents on your chat sessions, what it does is actually push suggested comments automatically from the AI, and your agents then teach the AI whether that's an appropriate thing to say to a customer or not. So you're using your agents to actually teach the AI to respond better to customer queries, and actually from experience, that's probably the way to do it. So we've got the bots in the contact center. What are we good at? What do our agents need in terms of skills? Well, they tend to be, the first thing is we probably need the general agents that pick up from the chatbot. If the chatbot can't triage the customer, the Swiss Army knife agent starts to take over and apply intelligence to try and solve customer problems. These are generalists. They need really good systems backup, good knowledge management to help them solve problems. But they are problem solvers as well. But we also get distinct problem solvers who can take big complexity, meaty problems. I always describe it as sticking the fork into the spaghetti, a back-end process on behalf of the customer. Then we can crowdsource some knowledge. So again, if consumers want to help each other, sometimes they have much better solutions. So how do we learn from consumers? Negotiation is a really underestimated skill that robots and AI find very difficult. So how do we get negotiators in our contact center skill sets who are fantastically good at calming customers down, finding out what their problems are? And then we have something that we've been talking about for a while, networked experts, deep specialists that can take deep problems on and start to solve them. And these guys often are not in the contact center. They could be anywhere. They could be doctors. They could be engineers, people that actually are close to the problem and can take on complex problems. All of this is probably part of the future contact center. I don't have time to really elaborate too much on those roles. But what I will say is don't believe the hype on some of this AI stuff. What I actually do, it's not Botman versus Super Agent at all, because they shouldn't be against each other. They should complement each other. How do we use Botman plus Super Agents to create better customer experiences? Because they're good at different things. How do we plug the technology into the things that the technology is good at? And how do we then plug our intelligent front-end people who create those customer experiences into that arena to really get it right for customers?